record at this time. Yay. Hello. So this time I have a helper. That's the good news, who can answer questions. So just use the chat to answer questions, or ask questions, I should say, as I go along. Let me ask you a question first. Where are people coming from? Go ahead and put in the chat where you're coming from. Wake County, Holly Springs, yay. Apex. Holly Springs. Oh, lots of, hey, Holly Springs in the house. Awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. All right. And while people are still getting in here, tell me what grade your student is in. That way I have an idea of what I'm looking at. 8th and 9th, 8th grade. Okay. Lots of early folks. Awesome. 9th. Oh, lots of early people. Oh, good. No like stressing 11th grade parents. That's awesome. And it's okay to admit if you're an 11th grade parent, it's all right. You're safe here. Awesome. Okay, cool. What was my other question for you? Oh, I had another one. Shoot. Will I remember what it is? Probably not. Can't remember what my other question was. All right. So as we go along, if I remember the question, I'll ask you. I can't see your questions, but my lovely assistant to my right here can. And so if he sees questions coming up, he'll stop me so I can stop along the way. All right. Because I won't, once I turn my shared screen on, I won't be able to see your questions, but he can. All right, so let me get my slides ready to rock and roll. And of course, now I can't see anything. I hate that. Ah! Back to slide 1 and exit. All right, and here we go. Awesome. All right. All right, so welcome. Here we go. So this is navigating the college application process from application to finding money. And let me talk a little bit what we're going to do today. We are going to look at the 2 paths for college. We're mostly going to spend time on the second path. We're going to talk about the application process, financial aid, merit aid, and scholarship. All right, my goal for when you walk out of this workshop, and I just realized I don't have my mic in, so hold on, because then it'll be easier to hear me and I don't have to yell. All right, so my goal for you to walk away from this workshop is to understand how the college system works so you can get the most amount of money for college. That's my goal. Let me tell you a little bit about who I am. I worked in higher education for 17 years. I was the director of admissions at 2 different schools for 8 years, John F. Kennedy University in California and Meredith College here in North Carolina. I've also worked in student affairs and housing, student activities, international students, former associate dean at the California College of the Arts. I worked at Sarah Lawrence and the University of Florida. My bachelor's degree is from the University of Southern California. My master's is student personnel administration and higher education from New York University. I am currently the owner of College Path Advising, and I'm recently an associate member of the Independent Educational Consulting Association. All right. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about the 2 paths to college. The first path to college is the traditional path. So this is the school that you've heard about your whole life. The school maybe your parents do. And when I say your parents, I mean students, your parents, not parents, your parents, although it could have been. The schools your friends are going to, or at least they hope they're going to go to. And the school that's the hardest I can get into. That's the first traditional path. That's the path that most of us parents have done. Let me talk, I'm going to spend much more time talking about the best fit, which is the best fit academically, best fit socially, and the best fit in budget. Let me talk first about academically. Academically, a school that's not beyond your reach doesn't mean you can't include a school that is a little out of your reach. I'm all for that. But part of when you're looking at the money picture of it, if you have a school that's within your GPA wheelhouse or testing wheelhouse, the odds of you getting merit aid is higher. If you're a little below your GPA at that school, your odds of getting merit aid increases even more. So if you have an unweighted GPA of a 3.5 and you're looking at a school that's at 3.7, that's a reach of a school for you. Let me explain for a second what GPA unweighted and weighted is. On PowerSchool, since most of you seem to be in the Wake County area, the GPA that's listed on your PowerSchool account, that is your weighted GPA. So that is including any honors classes you've taken, AP classes. Most of you probably won't have taken IB classes. An honors class gives you a half a point higher in your GPA, and a AP class gets you a full point GPA. Most of you are 8th and 9th graders, so the probably AP classes haven't hit you yet. So an example would be if, let's say in biology, you're at AP Bio and you get a B, you technically are going to get a 4 on your credit versus a 3 on your credit, which would be what you would get for a B if it was unweighted. All right. The other thing about academically is making sure that you have classes, that majors that you're interested in, and options if you change your mind. You may be dead set on doing a specific major, but you may get there and start doing it and going, oh, this is not what I thought it was going to be. An example could be, let's say you're thinking about business and then you realize you have to take all these accounting classes and you're not so great at math. That may be a bit of a challenge for you. So that would be an example of majors you're interested in, because, you know, maybe you could switch to a marketing major as an option. So you're still in business, but you're in a different faction of the business major. Socially, you feel comfortable at the school you're at. There's groups you want to join. People live on or off campus in the type of community you're looking for. Do people disappear on the weekend? Will you disappear on the weekend? And of course, what you think students you'll do now and what you'll do then may be two very different things. Good news, parents, is that most colleges, the laundry machines are now free. They don't have to pay extra for those. And so the excuse to come home and do their laundry, or their excuse for them to come home to you and do their laundry, that doesn't have to be a money issue anymore. Budget. Can you afford it? Meaning, can the family afford it? Does that particular college give merit aid? How much merit aid do they give? What's their rate of graduation? If it's a 4-year graduation and 20% of the students graduate, well, that may not be such a great graduation rate. Public schools tend to have a lower graduation rate, and you can look at a 4 and a 6-year graduation rate, and that's usually within reason. If you're looking at an out-of-state public school, do they offer out-of-state waivers or in-state tuition? There's a huge myth out there that South Carolina schools offer in-state tuition to North Carolina students. That is not true. Clemson does not do that. They used to do it for a certain GPA and test score. They don't do it anymore. The only South Carolina school I know that does it right now is Winthrop does it. They offer an in-state tuition and then a stipend if you're 3.0 or above. Now, Tennessee has a few that does it. Georgia has a few schools that do it, because we touch Tennessee and Georgia, just a smidge on Georgia. So those are some examples of schools that do offer in-state tuition. Virginia is awful. Most of them do not. The only one I can think of is James Madison, and it's only if you're at a certain GPA and test score and like the top, I think it's the 5% of your class. All right, so I'm going to give you a little preview about scholarship myths. So myth number 4 is that applying for scholarships and applying for college is different. Let me explain a little bit about what I mean by that. What I mean is that all the things that go into your college application, which are all the things I'm going to talk about, are part of usually your scholarship application. Things that go into your application is not just the piece of paper you write it down on. It's not even just the essays that you write. It's all the things you do in high school that contribute to your resume as a future college student. So your extracurriculars that you do, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. Anything, it's your classes, it's your extracurriculars, it's your volunteering, it's all of those things go both into your college application and your scholarship application. And what you're eligible for on a scholarship application, particularly for an outside scholarship, may depend on how much you volunteered or what organization you've been part of. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the path to college applications. So all parts of college applications, which I just sort of touched on, are your classes, the activities you do. What do you do during your summer? the tests you take. And when I talk about tests, particularly since we have some younger students in the group, when I'm talking about tests, I'm talking about the SAT and the ACT. Your college search, this goes back to where are you in the GPA? And of course, finally, the big piece of putting your application together, putting it on paper, both essays and your resume, and filling out the applications itself. All right, so let's talk a little bit about classes first. So in your 8th and 9th grade year, you want to plan a little bit for your 4 years of classes. Now, this is not to say you're going to be dead set on these classes. You're going to take the hardest classes you can do well in. In your core subjects, if you can take advanced classes, do so. As you get older, this is for much older as community, you might want to plan that starting in your junior year, you can take classes at the community college for free. And it doesn't have to be Wake Tech. It can be any community college in North Carolina. This is called dual enrollment in your junior and senior year. So particularly as a 9th grader, even late 8th grader, you might want to plan whether or not you're going to take those classes in those later years, because you'll have space, and those in most cases will transfer to public institutions. Not always private institutions, but you can get certain classes waived. It's not like it's for nothing. And it definitely shows rigor. I'm not going to go through all of this, but this is kind of the idea of what's involved in graduating and for college. Now, technically to graduate, the one I want to kind of bring down to is the one at the bottom there, which is foreign language. Technically to graduate from high school, I don't believe you actually need a foreign language. But if for most of the UNC public schools, and this includes NC State, you do need 2 years of foreign language. Last I checked, American Sign Language does count. 10th grade for classes, what you're going to look at is any adjustments you're going to need. 9th grade, you might have taken all the hard honors classes and maybe you didn't do so well in one. Do you need to bring it back a little bit on that? 11th grade, this is going to be your busiest year in high school, no matter whether it's classes, applications, extracurriculars, anything. And if you do it right, you can take a lot of stress off your applications in your 12th grade year. You want to study and work hard on your classes. Spring of your junior year is the last time most colleges are going to look at your grades. Fall of your senior year, most colleges, particularly in North Carolina, are going to have already made application decisions before you finish your fall of your senior year. Doesn't mean you can fall back and do nothing your fall senior year, because they can of course rescind your application if you decide to like blow everything off. And actually, you even have to let them know if you drop classes and things like that. You could be asked for mid-year grades in your senior year, particularly if you were deferred from an institution. Deferred means that you didn't get in for early action, and they pushed you to regular decision. Early action is when you have made the decision to apply early to that particular school. Most of my students do that. It doesn't mean it's a binding decision. That's early decision. None of the North Carolina public schools have early decision. They only have early action. So it's action on your part, action on their part. It doesn't mean anybody's bound and determined that you have to go to that school. Check colleges to see how they accept credits from community college. It's one of the things you want to look at. And you can always look at that earlier rather than later. You want to also look at how classes that might transfer over, how that will impact your financial aid. It's just something to talk about. If you're at a public school, it's not going to make very much difference in your financial aid, because you're unlikely to get very much financial aid from a public institution. It's much more the private institutions that may have a larger impact on your financial aid packages. 11th grade, you also want to make sure you get your recommendations. One thing that's a big difference, parents, from when we went to school, it's not, you have to get the physical letter. You just need to get your teacher's consent that you can send them your recommendation. You put it in Common App or Coalition, which are two of the application processes, or a college's thing. It sends them an email. They do all the information. They send it back. Common App and Coalition even tells you that they've already done it and when they did it. Doesn't tell you what they said. But that's all you really need to do, is you just need to get a commitment. Some schools require 2, many require only 1. One should absolutely be a core teacher, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the teacher that you did the best in their class. It could be a teacher that really saw a lot of growth from you. So that's my thing on recommendations. In 12th grade, you want to make sure your records are all up to date, your address is correct. I also highly recommend, particularly at the end of your junior year, check your transcripts, make sure they're accurate. I have seen a transcript that was calculated incorrectly. And make sure you have your letters of recommendation contacts in place. All right, activities. And I want to post out there, if anybody has any questions about classes, feel free to throw them in there and I will be happy to answer them. Activities and summer. So in 8th, 9th, and 10th grade, this is when you chance to try new things, join new activities, figure out what you like to do, because you may find what you love to do is something you may want to do in the future. Start regularly volunteering. You learn great skills volunteering. You get to explore new areas of interest. If you go to camp, do they have a counselor and leadership program? Or are there leadership positions you can take on in any organization and you work with, in church, at camp, in a program that you work with, any of those things? Ask for leadership opportunities. You can also start, parents, they can start working at 14, especially since we've got some 8th and 9th graders in here. They could start working at 14. And yes, work is highly valued on college applications. The other things you could start thinking about, and this is like really on the light mode, is start visiting some colleges. And I'm not saying you go for big like turnout and things, but it's a good chance to do it when it's so not important. When you get an idea, do they like the size? Do they like that atmosphere? What do they like about that? Visit 1 or 2 colleges in the area. It doesn't have to be a big trip. Or if you are going on a trip somewhere, of course, non-COVID, of course, then go and visit college campus. Take a look at it. It's a great opportunity to see, particularly a non-local college if you're out in someplace else. 11th grade, summer activities. Be clear what's important to you. This is the time in which you want to start focusing your interests. Look for leadership opportunities. Again, work during summer and breaks is a great time. Internships. Let me talk for a second about internships. Internships can be almost anything. They don't have to be a formal process. They can be your student is interning with you at your business if that's appropriate. You could be interning at a business in which you're interested in. If there's a particular field that you're interested in, see if there's a way you can intern with that particular person in that field, or it's a friend of a friend. It doesn't have to be a formalized program for an internship. Pre-college programs. Pre-college programs are programs that are offered at different colleges, and typically they have a theme or a particular focus. It's not just sort of a random thing. Sometimes it's classes that are being offered, and pre-college programs are a great way to figure out if you like that particular college or if you don't like that particular college. Also, 11th grade, and this is not just summer, this is actually earlier in 11th grade, is when you should start being intentional about your college search. This is the time when colleges should hear from you and understand that you're interested in them. And summer is when you should actually be pretty clear about where you're going to go. Summer between 11th and 12th grade. This is going to be a super busy summer. You hopefully are working, your college search is complete, and beginning in August, as far as filling in the applications, they open at the beginning of August, August 1. You also should have your college essays done before that if you can. When I'm working with my students, I actually start working with my students in late March with their college applications. That way they have their junior teacher to take an English teacher to take a look at them as one other pair of eyes to take a look at it. All right, tests. All right, any questions on activities really before I move on? Nope. Okay. All right, tests. The PSAT, it can be offered in 8th and 9th grade. Do you need to take it? No. Does it do anything for you? Not particularly. Maybe an AIG program thing, that's possible. But as far as the college part of it, you'll get more mail, that's for sure. So you definitely, every time you take one of these tests, it definitely triggers mail, just so you know, from colleges. Get a big box, stick it to the side. You don't need to keep everything. So public schools typically do the pre-ACT in 10th grade. They also do the PSAT typically. They don't always do both. The National Merit Scholarship qualification, though, is in 11th grade. So juniors this year would have taken it just a couple of weeks ago. So if you've got a sophomore, and I saw a couple of 10th graders in the group, if you've got a sophomore and they're a high achieving student, they should be taking that PSAT in 11th grade. Typically, it is offered in October. This year, of course, it's weird, and it was offered in January. So I highly recommend, if you're a high achieving student, to take it in 11th grade. Sometimes schools don't let you sit for it, so you got to get there early for that, as far as letting them know you want to do that. There are free resources to study for the PSAT and the SAT and the ACT. Khan Academy is one. Word of the Day on your phone and an app for College Board. These are great ways to start studying. And if you start studying early, 5-10 minutes a day, just imagine how much study time that will end up being. Now, mind you, as far as the math is concerned, when you get to about math 3 is when the SAT is kind of at. Oh, it looks like I have a question. What's the question? How have colleges changed their approach to requiring the test? I will get to that. I have a whole slide on that. So the answer is yes and no. So I will get to that in a second. Good question, though. All right, so as far as which test you should focus on, SAT or ACT, doesn't matter. Every college that I know of takes both. Most of them are not particular about which one. And so when is a good time to start studying? Now, but even like 5-10 minutes. We're not talking about huge stuff. And Khan Academy is free. That's a great thing. All right, 11th grade tests. And I promise I will get to the how tests are changing. Public schools in Wake County do the ACT in 11th grade. The SAT is offered but not required. The ACT is free in 11th grade. And right now they're taking it on the 23rd. Apparently I have another question. What app stops? It's Word of the Day for College Board, I think, for the SAT app. And Khan Academy is much better with math than it is with the English. But you just do, if you do SAT words in a search in your shopping thing for your phone, it'll come right up. PSAT in the fall, which I talked about already. ACT and SAT in the spring. You don't need to take both tests. Pick the one you feel you do the best on. Most colleges take both and they don't care. All right. So one thing you'll see I have struck out is colleges require the check to see which colleges require the writing section and subject tests. This is an SAT thing. So my understanding is after the March SAT is no longer going to have the essay section or the subject tests. Most traditional students don't need to worry about the subject test. It tends to be more of a homeschool thing. The ACT still will have the essay section. I don't know how long that will last. Most schools do not require the essay section, so don't stress if it's not on your SAT. And most colleges don't require it. You cannot see the questions. Do you mind reading? Yes, I can definitely read them aloud. I'm going to get to the next question. Yes. Okay. COVID and tests. This is going to answer the question of have colleges changed their approach to requiring tests? So let me talk a little bit about last year, meaning it's actually technically this year, but it's last year. So last year, most schools went test optional as far as the ACT and the SAT. The schools that did not were Florida public schools were kind of the exception. Some required the test, but didn't use them in the admissions process. An example of that was Campbell University in Western Carolina. I think they used it more for merit aid. This year, we still don't know. Right now, what I do know is Harvard, University of Virginia, the UCs in California, Syracuse, and Tulane have all gone test optional for fall 2020 applications. So that means students who are applying this coming up fall, those are test waived. Will this change? We don't know. So last year, Harvard again was one of the first to go test optional. Same with the UCs. UCs actually are going 3 years, so they are evaluating. I think they're going to come up with their own test. So that's what's going on with COVID. Let me see if I got any questions. Okay, so one of the other questions is what app helps study for the SAT? If you go to your shopping, whatever your phone uses, Android or iPhones, if you typed in Word of the Day or College Board Word of the Day, it should be right there. That should answer that one. All right. Any other test questions before I move on from tests? Okay, I'm moving on. So that was the COVID thing. So the answer to COVID for juniors this year, we don't know. That's the reality. I can tell you that the North Carolina public system was very reluctant to go test optional. They felt that since juniors took it ACT in the spring, that they should count the tests, not taking into consideration that you normally would take them again or 2 or 3 times. So I don't know if the North Carolina public system will do that. It's easier for colleges to do the tests. Part of what the purpose of the tests are, the purpose of the test is to sort of understand GPA. So an example would be if a student has a 4.0 unweighted GPA, let's say, and they have either a 13 or a 1400 SAT or a 31 ACT. That works with that GPA. Now, if you have a student that has a weighted 3.2 GPA, let's say, and they get a 34 on the ACT, goes up to 36 for those that don't know, or a 1400, 1360 SAT, that doesn't match. So what the student needs to do is explain why that doesn't match. And that's part of what the tests are used is sort of it's supposed to even out the playing field, but it ultimately is to support a GPA. That's what its purpose is. So should you take the test if you can? Yes, you should. And I can tell you everybody who took the tests last year, who did well and turned them in, did fairly well. Did it count against them if they didn't take the test? Not that I've seen. So I don't think colleges were holding it against them if they didn't take it. That definitely wasn't the case. All right, I'm making sure no more questions. Okay, college search. Okay, so I've already touched a little bit about this. 9th grade, you're looking at the size of the school. If you're on a trip, go visit a college, that kind of thing. 10th grade. Okay, so when COVID's over, there's usually college fairs, but I will also say most colleges are still visiting high schools, at least virtually, and you can go to those sessions. They'll remember you, believe it or not. You should visit some college campuses. Again, it doesn't have to be super stressful. It doesn't have to be a big deal. I am a bigger fan of doing the little information sessions if you can. You can walk around any college campus and all the buildings are pretty. I mean, that's the reality. Most buildings look nice. Most of them, if you're in North Carolina, a lot of them are brick. If you're in California, a lot of them are glass. So it kind of depends on where you're at. Yes, some of them actually have ivy growing on them. You should start collecting information, see where your GPA is, but don't fall in love with a school. Don't fixate on a school. This is a chance to look around to get an idea. The less you fall in love with one particular school, the more opportunity you will have for merit aid. And I just saw a question. All right, how much does it hurt, or does it? Your kids are not good test takers, but are good students. Okay, so the answer to that question is more or less, if your student is not a good test taker, you need to study for the tests. That's the basic. They may need to take it a little more often. You may have to, as part of your application, explain why you didn't do so well on the tests. What else? Like a strategy that I sometimes use with my students is, let's say they're not a good test taker, but if they take the test more often, they get better at it because they're not as stressed about it. In the fall of senior year, the SAT anyway, I don't remember the ACT off the top of my head, is done in August, October, and November. So a student that maybe takes it in August, October, and November may do better by the third test because they're now used to it more. Am I a big advocate? Keep taking the test? No. And I can tell you, if you don't do anything different from one test to another, like study, you will not, the scores are not likely to change. That's been pretty much standardized as far as that. So do schools look at tests over GPA? It depends on the school is kind of the answer. If you're looking at a high caliber school, or if you're looking at merit aid is very much attached to grades and GPA. It's grades, GPA, and test scores. So it can make a huge difference. That's why I advocate study, even if it's just a little bit each day, so it's not too overwhelming. If you're a junior and you're not a good test taker, or you're doing the practice test and you're not doing as well as you would like to do, I recommend in your junior year, get a tutor. You could either do it online and they have guarantees, or you can do it with a individual person and they will tend to tailor it directly to a particular student, but they do not typically have what statistics for you to tell you, yes, this student did better or that student did better. All right, I think I answered that. All right, back to college search. Okay. Financial aid. The reason I put financial aid here under the college search is because this is the year, your 10th grade year is the year that's going to be used for your FAFSA, which is your free application for federal student aid. And this is something that you fill out as with your taxes and such. The number one mistake parents make is not fill it out. So you don't have to fill it out in 10th grade. You actually fill it out in October of your senior year. But this is the year, the tax year they're using. That's what I wanted to make sure you know. So if you've got a 10th grader now, the tax year they're going to use is 21. So, all right. All right, no more questions. Okay. College search, 11th grade. Okay, this is the time you get serious. Spend time thinking about your interests and what you want to do. What kind of environment do you want to be in? Looking at test scores and GPA that match. The junior year is also the year to start interacting with schools. Don't wait until the fall of your senior year. Interaction with schools is something that they do notice. They mark little things in your thing. You become a prospect and they mark, oh yes, this person has been to this information session. They visited campus. Oh, they attended this event. That actually does make an impact in some cases in merit aid. All right. Applications. All right. So 11th grade, you're looking at tests, grades, and focused activities. You're putting your resume together. Everything you do in high school is part of your student resume. Any clubs, activities, formal, informal, that all goes there. Tests, we've talked a lot about tests. Essays, you want to write that between your 11th and 12th grade year. There are short essay, there's a short, well, not short essay, there's a longer essay that's about 650 words. And then there are supplemental essays. Most colleges have at least 2 supplemental essays. Some of them have more. It depends on the school. The Common App opens on August 1. There's also the Coalition. Some schools only take the Coalition or only take the Common App. They're just 2 different platforms. More and more are taking both. That's the good news. Like it used to be Chapel Hill only took Coalition. Now they take Common App and Coalition. Same with Clemson. Clemson used to only take Coalition. In some cases, you also will use a college-specific website for their application. An example would be there are a couple of free applications the last week in October during CFNC week, which is the College Foundation of North Carolina. Like ECU is typically free during that week. A couple private schools are also free. They had a bunch this year that were free. I don't know if they'll continue. Hopefully they will. And that is a separate application process. It's the same information. It's just filling out a different platform. And again, picking people who can attest your growth, not just the A you got in class. Okay, so we've talked a lot about interests and other things. So one of the things when you're thinking about your interests is kind of focusing on one thing. That kind of goes back to that top thing about focus activity. So let's say you're really interested in giraffes. You love giraffes. Giraffes are awesome. And you know, why did I pick giraffes? Because I think giraffes are cool. You know, gosh, we get to see live giraffe births now. How awesome is that? So it's whatever your interest is, and if you're interested in giraffes. So let's pull that all together of how giraffes look as an interest. All right, so if you're in 8th and 9th grade, maybe you do a research project for a class on giraffes. Maybe to interview somebody who works with giraffes. And these days it's, you know, the one maybe only good thing about COVID is the accessibility of people is so much greater. So many programs have now gone online and you can go and listen to zoologists or zookeepers talk about things like giraffes. You know, what type of work is there with a giraffe? Interview people who work with giraffes and ask them what other things you can do with giraffes as far as working. Volunteer in areas that support giraffe. And I'm not talking about just going to the zoo and volunteering, but maybe there's a conservatorship that does fundraising for giraffes and giraffe care and giraffes in the wild. And that's part of what you can do for giraffes. By the way, this applies to anything other than giraffes as well, of course. In 10th and 11th grade, start working in areas that support giraffe. Be more directive about what you're doing. Find a major that fits that you want to work with giraffes. And in your application, you bring this all together and talk about your love of giraffes and how giraffes have been awesome and all the things you've learned about you. Now, you're not going to write a litany, but you're going to maybe talk about an experience you got to do working with giraffes and your inspiration for giraffes. Yes, I promise that's the end of the giraffes. All right. Financial aid, merit aid, and scholarships. Any questions? Not seeing any. Okay. All right. What's the difference? Financial aid is need-based money. And by the way, what you think is need and what the institution thinks is need is not always the same thing. If it's a public institution, what you think is need, the public institution typically doesn't care. However, public schools, because they know they're competing, sorry, private schools, they know they're competing with public schools, typically think you might need more aid than what it is because their ticket price is a little higher than everybody else's. Merit aid. Merit aid is the money colleges give to you based on their special formula. Do I know what the formula is? No. Can I give you a couple of hints? Yes. GPA, test scores, interest in the school, meaning that you've showed interest in that particular school. You've attended events, you've gone to things, you've interacted with the college, you've written thank you notes. All of that goes on a little record for you. And then finally, scholarships is usually money you apply for and win. And scholarships can be inside scholarships, meaning institutional scholarships that's beyond merit aid, and you apply for them, like the public schools in North Carolina. Once you're accepted, it gives you a whole search engine. You can look for departmental scholarships. Outside scholarships, there are lots of places to look for scholarships, and we're going to get to that. All right, let me talk a little bit about financial aid first. The free application for student aid, or the FAFSA, you fill it out in October of your senior year. And the information they're looking for is your income taxes. And the nice thing is there's now like a thing where you just connect your income taxes, your W-2 forms and money you earn that on that particular year, records of your untaxed income and benefits. And this time it's 2019 is for current juniors, just so you know. So students that are applying during the fall of 2021. Current bank statements, records of stocks, bonds, and trusts, and other investments. Students' custodial parents information that includes step parents. So if you are in a divorce situation or a student has two homes or more than one home, it's whoever the custodial parent is. It's usually the student that's going to claim them on their tax returns. But that also includes the step parent as well. So let's say you have joint custody. If you have joint custody, it's going to whatever parent probably puts them on their taxes. And so there is a little bit of a strategy if you're reading between the lines on that. What it doesn't look at on the FAFSA is it doesn't look at your IRA or your 401k, and it does not look at your house. It does look at parents' assets at 5.65% because it does understand someday you have to retire. And second, but it looks at your students' assets at 20%. Student assets would include anything that's in their bank accounts, 529 plans, things like that. So FAFSA takes all that information and comes up with the expected family contribution, or the EFC. A lot of people get confused about think that's the amount of money they're going to pay for college. That is not the amount of money you're going to pay for college, and that is not the amount of money that colleges will pay up to for you. So what the EFC does is it gives the colleges information of what they think you can pay. And basically base your aid on that amount. It kind of determines your need. It can also play into some merit aid, but some merit aid, particularly at private schools, are intermixed between need and merit. So a lot of people get confused and think, well, that's the amount of money I'm going to have to pay total. No. Is that the amount of money you're probably going to pay? At least, because not all schools meet 100% aid. And I'll talk about this in a second. All right. There is also a second form that is not required at all schools, but required at some. One of those would include, the only North Carolina public school that requires it is Chapel Hill. It's exactly the same as the FAFSA, but in addition to all the FAFSA information, it also looks at the money of the current year. It looks at any income tax, your mortgage, and it also looks at the other parent and step parent. The other thing I will say is, let's say you have sole custody and the other parent doesn't contribute. CSS form does not care. They still want that information. Why? I don't really know, but that's how they do it. So that's the CSS form. Let me check and make sure I don't have any questions. Okay, moving on. All right, let's talk a little bit about merit aid. So merit aid is money that colleges give to you. Typically, you don't have to apply separately, although in some cases it's tied to honors colleges at schools. It's based on GPA and test scores being ACT and SAT. Location. So an example would be if you are, Meredith's a good example. If you, a couple years ago, they had a program that if you were a Wake County or a Raleigh student, you got a little extra money for that. So sometimes it can be based on location. Interest in that school. Remember all those little check marks I told you about showing their interest? That's part of the interest in their merit aid sometimes. And then their special formula. They pay big bucks for this formula. The purpose of merit aid for colleges is to attract this type of student that they want at their school. And usually that has to do with academics and the level of academics that they want at their particular school. They're not looking like for people with blonde hair or anything like that. They don't test that part. All right. I talked about this already. That's a double spin. Okay, let me talk a little bit about how this breaks down in reality. So what I've pulled is I've pulled NC State and Campbell University. And for those that are unfamiliar with Campbell University, because I assume you're all familiar with NC State, Campbell University is about 45 minutes outside of Holly Springs. It's a smaller school, as you can see. It's 3,471 versus 23,000 at NC State. Tuition, room and board is 20,000 versus 45,000. But wait for it. I'm going to break this all down. Need met. So this is what I was talking about with your EFC. So NC State only covers up to 53% of need, whereas Campbell is going to cover 80% of need. Merit aid at NC State is a 3.8%, and at Campbell it's 15.5%. So what these two numbers tell you is it tells you that NC State's not given a heck of a lot of aid, but Campbell University is pretty much everybody's getting a little bit of aid. And why did I pick Campbell University? I picked them because they're close to us and they're also really good with merit aid. That's why I picked them. Obviously, one is public, one is private. The application fee right now, NC State's application fee is $85, while Campbell's is free. Unweighted GPA of enrolled students is a 3.76 of NC State. And of course, if you know anything about NC State applications at this point, this is true for the ACT of 27 to 31. NC State is not a strict numbers place. It's definitely a more je ne sais quoi of a student. They don't, yes, they care about GPA and test scores, but it's much more about what the student brings to the college. This is where that activity section is super important for NC State. Campbell is much more a numbers game. It's if you've got a 3.53 GPA or 20 or higher on your ACT, you are likely to get in admissions. So let me break this down a little bit further for you. So if we're looking at costs, tuition and fees right now at NC State is $9,100, and at Campbell it's $34,000. Room and board. I want you to pay attention to this. If you look at room and board between Campbell and NC State, Campbell's is actually lower, $11,359 versus $11,210. Then when you add it all up, you're about 20 grand for NC State and 45,000 for Campbell. Now I know what you're thinking, Jen, I still can't afford this. That's way too much money. Well, I can tell you most people, because remember we go back to that merit aid, most people are not paying that $45,000 at Campbell. So let me break down how Campbell's aid works. So this is probably from 2018, 2019 data, not this year. So 806 of the freshman class, 99% of them applied for financial aid. And out of that group, 84% or 679 of them were found to find need. Doesn't mean they're the only ones that got aid. Out of the 679, all of them received aid, and fully met aid was 24%. I'm sorry, fully met aid was 24%, but overall a percentage of need met was 68%. The average award for the need students was 28,000. And of the students that were found without the need and only received merit aid was 125 students, 15%. And out of that group, they got 18,532. And I could tell you, having had a student that's gone through the Campbell process, this is pretty accurate as far as what I've seen. I think I actually saw them, they got a little bit more than 18,000 with probably a no need. All right, so we break down the prices. So if we look at tuition between NC State and Campbell now becomes $9,100 and $16,000. Room and board stays the same, with NC State being slightly higher. Now, when you break it down, we're no longer looking at that $45,000. We're looking at 27,000 versus and 20,000, not 40,000, $45,000. So what the point of this is that I want you to be aware that just because it's a private school doesn't mean it's out of the realm of possibility, because the reality is Campbell has to compete with NC State, and therefore they're going to give money to students to come to Campbell because they have to get students and they know they're competing with NC State and all the other North Carolina public schools. So really, this is just a demonstration of private colleges do not have to be out of the rate. You won't know until you apply and you get your merit aid package. All right, so that's comparison on that. Scholarships, money from outside sources, you find, you apply. So let me talk a little bit about the myths. One of the myths is there only is a few available. Another myth is you have to be a senior, that you have to be in a million clubs and organizations. That I hopefully already dispelled scholarships and applying for college is different, and that there's a magic formula for winning scholarships. I'm going to break this down. Oh, I should check and see if there's any questions. Nope, no questions. Okay. All right. As of like 2 weeks ago, Wake County had 307 listed on their website of scholarships, and they were not all for seniors. Some of them were for any student. To give you an idea, there is a scholarship for, I don't know if it's on this particular one. There was a scholarship that is up, I think this month, open to any age, I believe, about technology. You had to write like a text message about technology, open to anybody. One of the scholarship search engines I like is Scholly, but there are free options as well. Example of free options is College Board. Who else? There's a College Board is one of them. I'm trying to think of the other one. FastWeb is another one. There's also scholarship books. My favorite authors is Jen and Kelly Tanabe. The other thing you can search for scholarships is on Google, put your activity plus the word scholarship. Churches and organizations, anything that you are part of may have scholarship, and may not be a formal scholarship. You just may have to ask. Places you volunteer, places your parents work at. Local scholarships tend to be, there's town ones like Chamber of Commerce sometimes has one, Better Business can have one, individual businesses can have them. These are all places where you can find scholarships. But one thing I will say is if it's a scholarship that's just asking for your name, address, and phone number, it's probably a data mining as opposed to an actual real scholarship. The only one I've seen that's not that is by Niche, Niche. I will actually put that in the chat. Niche. There we go. I put it in the chat. Theirs is one is a monthly one. I don't know if you have to be a senior for that one, but that one is just a name and address one. So also students, at no point you should be giving your social security number unless you're like a finalist in something. All right. Myth number 2, you have to wait to be a senior. You don't have to wait. There are scholarships available for all students. Sometimes they're not technically listed as scholarships. Sometimes it's just money, but you can put them towards scholarship. I'm going to give you an idea. Minecraft has a scholarship on how to use the benefit of using Minecraft. You can also continue to apply after you've graduated and are in college. Even if you go to community college, there are scholarships available. But one thing about finding scholarships and applying for scholarships, getting scholarship, it's like a job. You've got to spend, particularly as you're older, in your junior, senior year, you're talking a 5-6 hour week of searching and applying for scholarships. All right. Scholarship myth number 3, you need to be in as many clubs and organizations as possible. No. In fact, for both college and for scholarships, it's much more about sincere participation. Places that you love, going back to my giraffe thing. Are you in a giraffe club and you love giraffes and that's what you're doing with giraffes? So I lied, I did bring up giraffes again. But it's about sincere participation. It's not about, going to every single club on the planet. Focus on a few areas. And this is where starting early on activities can really make a difference, because as you move up in your activity, then maybe you can get a leadership or a president role as you move up in your particular interest. High schools have tons of organizations. If your high school doesn't have that organization, start your own. Nowadays with Zoom, it's so much easier. You can pull a group of students and consider that a club, an organization. Just, create your own thing. It doesn't have to be a formalized thing. So that's about myth number 3. Myth number 4, applying for scholarships and applying for college is different. Pretty much everything you use on a college application, all your experiences, is going to be used on a scholarship application. It's a different form. It's different dates for deadlines. You may be asked for an essay. You can, particularly with supplemental use, you can reuse things. I'm a big fan of recycling. You may have an essay that you can use in multiple different ways. You just have to reshape it a little to fit that scholarship. So it's not different to apply for scholarships and applying for college. It's a different form. All right, there's a magic formula for winning scholarships. Okay, this is a little bit true. So here's the secret sauce. I'm going to tell you the secret formula. Number 1, read the directions. Number 2, follow the deadlines. Number 3, know the mission of the scholarship. If you apply late and don't follow the directions, you're not going to get that scholarship. So there's your secret formula. See, I told you I was going to tell you something cool and new. All right, so let me give you a little bit of an example of one. This is from 2019. I didn't see them posted this year or in 2020. So I haven't seen them posted. They may have ended this particular scholarship, but this is a good example of a local scholarship. So one of the things of who is eligible is you have to be a resident of North Carolina. You have to submit the essay electronically as a Word document or PDF. That means you do not give them a link to your Google Doc. You have to give a photo of yourself. You have to be a high school senior or a college undergraduate. You have to complete the application. That means don't leave things blank. And you have to submit a school transcript. Their general rules was basically you can't be a member of this particular organization, which is a local law firm, and that they own the rights to your essay, which sometimes when it says own the rights to your essay, it means you may not be able to use the essay at someplace else, just so you know that. Obviously, if you plagiarize the essay, you'll be disqualified. All right. Let's put in a little bit more of them. So what was this contest? So to enter the contest, applicants were expected to write an original essay of approximately 500 words on the topic of, if you had an opportunity to change your community in a positive way, what specific changes would you make? So let's look a little bit at what this organization is about. So this organization is attorneys in Raleigh. They represent folks that have workers' compensation issues. So does it mean, but one of the things they're really excited about is how students do great things in their community. So that kind of tells you something. They're looking for positive change in the community. So one of the things you might want to write about is not only about how you would change your community, but what have you done to help change your community? So that's just an example of one scholarship in particular. So let me give you the scholarship summary. Start now. Keep going until you're finished school. Know your resources, find scholarships, don't pay for them. Read the direction, follow deadlines, know the mission of the scholarship. Plan to spend a fair amount of time on research and application and the applications. And make sure you also know how outside scholarships are going to impact your financial aid. It shouldn't, but it sometimes does. It can lower your institutional merit aid. And also there's a 100% chance of not getting a scholarship if you don't apply. All right, so let me talk a little bit about what I do. So what I do is I help you put all of this information into practice. I help your student hopefully understand what their interests are and how they might be able to put it in interest, particularly if I'm starting with a student younger. When we get into 11th grade, we start the college search. And when we're doing the applications, I help your student put their best foot forward through their essay writing and their applications, supplemental essays. My charge right now is $950, and that's paid in 2 installments, upfront now at $400, and then June of their junior year, it's $550. This is again another rundown of what I do. And I will also give you the link to the website where you can find more of this information at. The recording will be there, and all of the notes are also there. So I'm going to open it up to questions. And I'm going to take this off so I can see the chat better. And I promise I will read the questions. Awesome. All right, questions. You guys are easy. Oh, I also will pull up the link to the page on the website. Give me 1 second. I gotta find that. No questions still. Okay. Oh, by the way, when I'm looking over here, I'm looking at another computer screen that has the questions on it. Let me pull up the link with the website stuff. Give me 1 second. All right. It is here. And all of those notes, I should have told you this in the beginning, and I spaced in all my excitement because I tend to get excited and I talk a lot. Here is the notes are also on this page, on the link I just put in the chat box. And it is, and I'll answer that question that's there in a second. Links to make an appointment if you want to meet with me. It's free, no obligation, as well as the notes for this, and the recording will also end up there. All right, I have a kid who is a junior, strong student, and has been working for a full year. Awesome. She has no club activities. How badly will that hurt her? Work is still considered an activity. It kind of depends on where she wants to go, not to be vague, but work is an activity. And especially if she can talk about the skills that she's learned in her work, that's a great. Work is great. Colleges like work. As far as other activities, there's still time. I would really make this summer count and the rest of the spring to count. Do something that she loves. You know, if she loves something, have her try to do more of it. Try to do some volunteering if possible. And volunteering can happen in informal ways as well. Like I've talked a lot about the sort of the informal as well as the formal. It doesn't have to be something, you know, nobody's going to sign a sheet and turn it in. That's not going to happen. So volunteering is a quick, easy way, and you can get a lot of volunteering done between now and your applications coming in. But make it meaningful, something that she loves to do. But having no club activities is not going to kill you because she's worked. That's an activity. And it also depends on where she goes. Where do we find the requirements for test scores and GPA for different schools like the ones you mentioned for Campbell and NC State? I get that from college data. That's the source that I use. Usually when I'm working with clients, I provide that information to them. Another way you can search for the most recent information about a particular school is if you enter in that particular school on Google, and freshman class this year will be 2020. 2020 data for typically for test scores is going to be wonky because the students who turned in the test scores they're going to be high. So it's going to be inflated for those test scores. So just be warned of that, of 2020 data. But I get mine from college data. That's a website. Other places where you can Niche has it. College Board has it. So those are places where you can get that information. And the individual colleges sometimes have it as well. Other questions? All right. Well, I'll give it a few more seconds to make sure nobody has any other questions. I do want to thank you all for coming. I really appreciate you being here and finding out more about what I do and about the college process. And hopefully I'll be able to see some of you somewhat in real life as much as we can, and have an opportunity to work together if that's something that's interesting to you. I do these workshops. I'll probably do another one in April if you have friends that are interested. I also, like I said, I'll have a free consultation with you. That's no problem. And that's pretty much it. I hope everybody enjoyed it. I hope you got a lot out of it. And like I said, if all the notes of what I talked about is at that website that is on the chat, the College Path Advising Workshop information. And anybody who attended, you'll get an email with that link as well, just so you know. All right, thank you again. I so appreciate you all being here. Gosh, I can't believe I kept it in an hour. I said an hour and a half because last time I ran long. But thank you all for coming, and I appreciate you being here. Have a great rest of your weekend, what's left of it.